Hello friends, welcome to Byju's classes. In today's session, we are going to discuss about the institution of marriage in India. We have already discussed about families in India. So the next thing, marriages in India. So what are we going to discuss in this session? We'll understand the institution of marriage along certain lines. We'll understand what kind of marital bond is there among different religions. Whether marriage is considered to be a sacrament or it is considered to be a contractual relationship across different religions. Then we will understand what is the age at which Indians enter into the institution of marriage. This can vary across religions. So we will look at the different religions and how this particular practice varies. Apart from that, among different social religious communities, we find that there is some exchange at the time of marriage. Certain things might be exchanged. So what are the rules regulations regarding this? Apart from that, what are some rules regulations when marital alliances are created? For example, endogamy, exogamy rules. What are these rules across different religions, across different communities? Apart from that, what are the norms related to premarital sexual conduct? What are the norms related to widow remarriage? So all these things we will try to analyze, and all these things keep on varying across religions. So we will look at all these things, and we will also look at different religions, how they permit all these things or they don't permit all these things, but how they regulate all these things. So all these things we are going to examine, we are going to analyze in this session. So first thing that we'll take up is what kind of marital bond exists across religions in India. Nature of marital bond. Now among Hindus, what is the nature of marital bond? Is it considered to be sacrament or it is a contract? Now in case of Hindus, marital bond is considered to be sacrament. That means the husband and wife, they're bound together forever, which indirectly means that marriages cannot be dissolved. So divorce is not allowed according to traditional Hindu system. Marriage is also considered to be an obligation among Hindus. It is a duty. Why marriage is an obligation? Why marriage is a duty as per Hinduism? Now, according to Hinduism, man has to enter into different ashrams at different ages. So the first stage of his life, he has to enter into he will be in the Brahmachari ashram. The next stage of his life is referred to as the Gruhastha ashram. The third stage is the Vanaprastha stage, and fourth stage is the Sannyas stage. So he has to pass through all these ashrams, and in all these stages, he has to fulfill certain duties, certain obligations are there, some responsibilities are attached with each and every ashram. In the first stage is the Brahmacharya stage. Celibacy has to be maintained. The next stage is the Gruhastha stage. Now, to enter into this ashram, he has to get married. Through Vivaha, man enters into the Grihastha stage, Grihastha ashram. So if he's not getting married, he will not be able to enter into this ashram. That is one of the reasons why marriage is necessity for a man in Hindu society. Apart from that, another reason why marriage is a necessity, why marriage is an obligation among Hindus. If he's getting married, then only he will be having a wife, then only he can have a male offspring. And male offspring is considered very important. It is through male offspring that man can be liberated from the cycle of birth, death and rebirth. If the male offspring carries out the last rites, the funeral pyre is lit by the male offspring, the pindadan is also done by the male offspring. So only if you are having an offspring, only if you are having a male offspring, then only you will be liberated from the cycle of birth, death and rebirth. So for this also, for having a male offspring, you need a wife, and for having a wife, you need to enter into the institution of marriage. So entering into the institution of marriage is important. Apart from that, according to Dharma Shastras, it is also your duty to perpetuate your kulam. So for this purpose as well, you have to enter into the institution of marriage. So marriage is an obligation for an individual within Hindu society. So those who are Hindus, they have this obligation. Apart from that, I told you, marriage is considered to be a sacrament. Once you are married forever. It is not considered to be a contractual relationship. But this thing was more followed among the upper caste. So divorce will not be there among the Duja caste, specifically among the upper caste Brahmins. But if you look at the non-Duja caste, among them, generally divorce and remarriage was accepted. But all these things are now gradually undergoing the change. Different laws have been passed at different points of time, different progressive laws which are impacting all these things. Widow remarriage laws have been passed, Hindu Marriage Act has been passed. Apart from that, in recent times, divorces, they are getting more and more simplified. Remarriages are also becoming more acceptable. But it is not that stigma has completely become zero. Now also there is some stigma associated with divorce and remarriages, but it is more acceptable, it is more commonly acceptable as compared to what it was in the past. So keep this in mind, among Hindus, marriage is considered to be a sacrament and marriages are a duty, it's an obligation, it's a necessity. Among Muslims, what is the scenario? Among Muslims, marriage is as per the Sharia law. Marriage is considered a contractual relationship which is on the basis of mutual consent. So it is not considered to be sacrament. So divorces are permitted among Muslims. But does that mean divorces are quite common among Muslims? Does that mean it is considered desirable among Muslims? Now see, among Muslims, divorce is permitted. But again, divorce is permitted under certain circumstances. Divorces should be there when peaceful, harmonious relationship is not possible. It is quite impossible for a husband and wife to stay together in a peaceful, harmonious relationship. Then only divorces should be there. And it is also regarding divorces to be undesirable. It is not that something which is favorable. So Islam is also considering divorces to be unfavorable. That is the reason it has put multiple checks on divorces. Generally, if you undergo divorce, some monetary sacrifices will be there. For example, if a woman is asking for a divorce, if a woman wants a divorce, then she might have to forego a part of mahar. Mahar is that present or that amount which is promised by the groom to the bride before marriage. So she might have to forego this mahar. Similarly, if a husband is going to divorce a female, is going to divorce a spouse, in such a scenario also he has to pay some amount of money. So checks are put in this manner. Financial obligations are put, so monetary sacrifices will be there. Another dimension here related to divorce, right of divorce is not equally bestowed on the two genders. The rules and norms governing divorce are different for men and they are different for women. For example, traditional Muslim society, the man could seek divorce through 3 pronouncements. 3 times if you say talaq, 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 divorce will be there. And again, whether it can be said immediately or whether there will be some duration, some space in between, again a lot of variations are there, controversies there regarding that. But the point here is man can unilaterally seek divorce through pronouncement of talaq 3 times. And he has to provide, after the third pronouncement, there is a period of 3 months for reconsideration. This period is called as the idat. And the man has to pay mahar to his wife. If a woman seeks divorce, she can do it in 2 ways. First is mutual consent with husband. This is called khula. Second option is she can seek divorce through judicial decree. She can file a suit against her husband in a court of law. And a law has been passed, Dissolution of Muslims Marriages Act 1939. It specifies certain grounds on which she can ask for a divorce. So through this mechanism also she can seek divorce. But she does not have those rights that a man has when it comes to seeking divorce. Those three pronouncements that used to be there in traditional Islam. So this is how right to divorce has not been equally bestowed on women. But divorce is permitted, but divorce is not considered favorable. Among Christians, what is the provision? Among Christians also, marriage is considered to be a sacrament. Among Christians, divorce is not permitted, but right to divorce has been gradually accepted. We have Indian Divorce Act 1869. And now this thing has also become gender just. Among tribals, marriage is always considered to be a contract. And there is no such stigma associated with divorce, remarriage. All these things are quite common among tribals. So these are the variations when it comes to the nature of marital bond. Among Hindus, it is considered to be sacrament. Among Christians, it is considered to be sacrament. Among Muslims, it is considered to be a contract. Among tribals, it is considered to be a contract. Among Hindus, divorce is not allowed. Traditional Hinduism, now it is allowed. Hindu Marriage Act and all these different laws we have passed. Among Muslims, divorce is permitted, but it is considered undesirable. Right to divorce, it varies between men and women. Men used to be at an advantage when it comes to traditional Islam. Now in recent times, there have been changes in the law as well. Christians, marriage is considered sacrament, divorce was not permitted, but now it is permitted. Different laws have been passed, and it is also more or less gender just. Tribals, there is no such taboo when it comes to divorce, there is no such taboo when it comes to remarriages. So this is about the nature of marital bond across different religious communities, social religious communities. Tribals are also included here. Now the next thing, age at marriage. At what age men and women enter into the institution of marriage? This also keeps on varying across different religious communities, social religious communities. So we will look at this dimension. Among Hindus, at what age you can enter into the institution of marriage? Traditional Hindu society, Orthodox Hindu society, what was the case? In traditional Hindu society, child marriage was allowed. So you can marry at a very young age, even before attaining puberty. What was the reason for child marriage? See, in the Orthodox society, chastity was given a lot of importance. Virginity was given a lot of importance. Promiscuous sexual behavior was avoided. That is the reason they were married at a very young age. And this was more prevalent in North India as compared to South India. This was more prevalent among upper caste as compared to lower caste. In fact, in lower caste, mostly the marriages used to happen after puberty. In upper caste, especially among Brahmins, child marriages were more frequent. Now the next thing, at what age, what exact age, men and women used to enter into the institution of marriage? Again, this exact age will vary from places to places depending on the circumstances, situation, but there have been certain prescriptions that you should enter into this institution at this particular age. For example, Manusmriti, it says that a man who is 30 years old can marry a female who is 12 years old. A man who is 24 years old can marry a girl who is just 8 years old. So these are mentioned within Manusmriti. During medieval period, at this point of time, the age of marriage is declining even further. There were instances of marriages between infants. Infant marriages, specifically in rural areas, were happening. In case of North India, it was also observed that the marriage is followed by another ceremony. The ceremony is referred to as Gauna. Now this is the ceremony after which marriage is consummated. The sexual relationship between husband and wife takes place. Age gap used to be huge. As you can see here, someone who is at the age of 30 is marrying someone who is just 12 years old. 24 is marrying someone who is 8 years old. And there were instances in which elderly widower were marrying young girls. And there were also instances in which girls who would not have even attained the age of 20 have become widows because they have married someone who is extremely old. There were instances in which girls are becoming widows before they are having menarche, that means the first menstruation. So a huge age gap between the boys and girls. The boys or men used to be older, girls used to be younger, and there was this huge age gap. But over a period of time, it has changed drastically. Social religious reform movements, they played a very significant role in increasing the age of marriage. Apart from that, we have also passed different laws. Marriage Restraint Act, Sharda Act, all these things have been initiated from time to time. So minimum age at marriage legislations have changed this thing. At present, the age for marriage for women is 18 years and age for marriage for men is 21 years. But this does not mean that child marriage does not take place in India. Now also child marriage is practiced. 1/3 of the girls get married before the age of 18, and there are instances in which girls are getting married before the age of 10. So these things continue even now. There are certain parts of India where it is prevalent, not everywhere. For example, some places in Rajasthan, some places in Madhya Pradesh. So there are certain days in the year which are considered auspicious for child marriages. For example, on Akshaya Tritiya, a lot of child marriages takes place. So now also it has not become zero. Now also child marriages are prevalent, but the numbers have definitely decreased. What about the age at marriage among Muslims? Among Muslims, marriage should take place only after puberty. What about Christians? Among Christians, the age of marriage is highest among all the social religious communities in India. What about tribals? See, among tribals also, marriage is not permitted before puberty. But after puberty, the members of the different tribes, they are allowed to stay within youth dormitories. So there are dormitories in which both male and female can stay. Sometimes there are dormitories for males and separate dormitory for females, but there will be no restriction on movement of males to female dormitories. Those kind of restrictions are not there. So a male member can move to a female dormitory at any point of time. So these dormitories are there, and in these dormitories, premarital sexual relations are permitted. These dormitories allow premarital sexual relations, and if a particular couple decides to get married, they can get married. And there is no such taboo here. If a couple is having premarital sexual relation, they might decide to get married, they might not decide to get married. So there is no such restriction here. But the point here is premarital sexual relations are allowed, in these dormitory sexual relations are allowed. Apart from this thing, another feature among tribal societies is old age is not a barrier to marriage. There are instances in which 50-year-old, they will be marrying someone who is just 15-year-old. For example, among Dafla tribes, a 50-year-old might be marrying a 15-year-old girl. Sometimes he is marrying someone who is very young because he is trying to secure that girl for his own son. Among tribals, widow inheritance practice is also there. That means if a man dies. He has multiple number of wives and he's dying. His son is going to inherit all these widows except for his biological mother. So all his wives will be his wife too, except for his own biological mother. So widow inheritance is there. So if an old man, 50-year-old man is marrying a 15-year-old girl and he dies over a period of time, his son is now going to get married to that girl who was 15-year-old at that point of time. So he's basically securing a wife for his son. In some tribes, women prefer to marry younger men. For example, among Bondos in Odisha, the young men, they provide support in old age. Generally, there is a difference in life expectancy between men and women. Men tend to die younger. So women tend to live for a longer duration. So higher chances that the man in a relationship will die first, then the woman will die. If the man is younger in age, then they will be together for a longer duration. So the younger man will support the female for a longer duration. So that is the reason the females, they prefer younger men among certain tribes. Next thing, what are the different rules regarding premarital conduct across different communities? Whether premarital sexual relationships are allowed across communities. What is the norm among Hindus? Among Hindus, chastity is considered to be a virtue for a girl. If a girl is not chaste, then there will be implications. If she is not observing chastity, it might be difficult for her to get married. So her chances of getting married get spoiled if she is not a virgin. Among Muslims also, sexual purity, chastity, they are all fundamental social values. In fact, young females, they are segregated from the company of men. The practice of veil is for this purpose. They have to cover their body with veil. Premarital sex, adultery, they are all considered to be serious misconduct among Muslims. Among Hindus also it is the same thing. We are talking about traditional societies. At present, things might be different, but these are all norms of traditional Hindu and Muslim society. What about tribals? Among tribals, premarital chastity is not considered to be a virtue for a girl. All kinds of sexual relations are accepted, except for incestuous relationship between relatives, between kins. In fact, among tribes, as I told you, there are youth dormitories. For example, there are youth dormitory like hotuls are there among some tribes. They refer to as hotuls. In these youth dormitories, both boys and girls, they will stay together after they have attended puberty. Sometimes there are separate dormitories for males and females, but again, they can freely move from one dormitory to the other. And among them, sexual relations is there. So these dormitories provide them an opportunity to know each other, to mix with one another, and to have sexual relations. Also, these dormitories form the basis for consent of marriage. In these dormitories, they get to know each other, and on this basis, they can decide whether they want to marry or not. Among tribals, adultery is not treated as a serious misconduct as it is treated among Hindus or Muslims. Now, what about the rules of mate selection? On what basis your partners are selected? Among Hindus, there are extensive rules when it comes to mate selection. Among upper castes, endogamy is strictly practiced. Caste endogamy. You should marry within the same caste. Among some castes, hypergamous practices can be there. For example, the male from the higher caste can take a bride from the lower caste. So this is practiced among Brahmins, Rajputs, Marathas. So hypergamous bonds exist among some upper castes. Hypergamy is more prominent among sub-castes. One example of hypergamy in Kerala. Younger sons of Nambudri Brahmins and Kshatriya, they can marry younger women. This kind of relationship is called Sambandham. But the children born from these relationships, they cannot inherit the property from the father's side. So higher caste Brahmin men, they are marrying women from other castes, which is not as high as the Brahmins. Children born are not allowed to inherit from the father's side. So hypergamous bond. Apart from caste endogamy, there is also prevalence of gotra exogamy. Now, what is gotra exogamy? You should not marry within the same gotra. In northern India specifically, there is practice of village exogamy. You should not marry someone from the same village. So all the members of the same village, of your own village, you should be considering them as your kins. In North India, there are even more extensive rules when it comes to kinship. Sapinda exogamy, sagotra exogamy, sapravara exogamy, different kinds of exogamies are there. For example, a male should not marry a female who can be related to her through his ancestors from 7 generations, from the father's side, from the mother's side, 5 generations. So if they are linked together, they should not marry. But in South India, these rules of kinship, they are not so extensive. In fact, in South India, cross-cousin marriage, uncle-niece marriages are also predominant. And we have already discussed why this could have been the reason when we discuss the different type of kinship patterns. But in recent times, all these things are gradually undergoing a change. Different laws we have passed, for example, Special Marriage Act. It permits marriage across religion, it permits marriage across caste. So things are now changing, but does not mean that caste and all these factors are not that significant. Even if you look at the matrimonial websites, the different advertisements on matrimonial newspapers, you will find that they are also segregated on the basis of caste. So caste is still relevant when it comes to deciding partners. But another thing has also become important. Class. When you are choosing your partner, occupational compatibility, individual compatibility is also taken into consideration. So caste and other dimensions are also becoming more important. So when it comes to Muslims, what are the rules which decide mate selection? Now, among Muslims, formally there is no such thing as caste. Islam is considered to be egalitarian. But in practice, among Muslims also, caste-like hierarchy is there. And what is the reason for this caste-like hierarchy? We already know about it. We have discussed it at different points of time. But mainly because most of the Muslims in India, they are converts from Hindus. Apart from that, when Islam is reaching India, at this point of time, it had already accepted hierarchy. For example, it had already accepted hierarchy in Iran. When Islam originated, it originated in Arabia. In Arabia, the society was an egalitarian society, tribal society. But in Persia, in Iran, society was already having class-like stratification. So it had become tolerant to inequality. And when it is coming to India, India already had caste system. It is getting impacted by it. And most of the Muslims in India are converts from Hinduism. So caste-like hierarchy is present within Muslims. So here also, endogamy is there. For example, man of higher caste can marry women of lower caste, but women from lower caste will not be allowed to marry someone from the higher caste. And sometimes there are instances of honor killing as well among Muslims. Another regulation and another rule among Muslims is Muslims should not marry those who worship idols. So Muslims cannot marry Hindus, but Muslims can marry Christians. So worship of idols, wherever it is there, marriages will not take place. Among Muslims, marriages between kins is allowed, but marriage between primary cousins are not allowed. It is considered as incestuous. Parallel cousin marriage, cross cousin marriage, all these things are permitted. Men are allowed to be polygynous. That means they can have multiple number of wives. They can have 4 wives at any point of time. Not more than 4, but at any point of time it can be 4. So the polygyny is allowed among Muslims. But one condition is there that their wives should not be sisters. So a man cannot marry 2 sisters. A man cannot marry aunt and siblings together. So this is a regulation here. Apart from that, surrogate and junior levirate is permitted. We already know what is the meaning of surrogate and levirate. Levirate means a female can marry the brother of her husband if the husband dies. The younger brother of her husband if the husband dies. Surrogate, a husband can marry his wife's younger sister if she dies. So surrogate and junior levirate both are allowed among Muslims. What about Christians? Among Christians, marriage should take place within the same church. Intercaste marriages also happen. See, Christianity is also egalitarian in nature, but Christianity also has some caste-like hierarchy. Caste-like differences are there again because most of the Christians in India, they also convert from Hinduism. So they are influenced by Hinduism. Apart from that, the majority community is Hindus. So again, at different points of time, there is interaction, influence is there. So intercaste marriages do happen. There are restrictions sometimes, but intercaste marriages do happen. For example, there are instances of marriages between Syrian Christians and Latin Christians. Apart from Christians, tribals, what kind of rules are there when it comes to selection of partners? Generally, clan exogamy and tribal endogamy is unknown, but there are instances of intertribal marriages as well. For example, among Khasis, Garos, Nagas, intertribal marriages are also allowed. Sometimes tribal women are also allowed to marry women from the plains. Marriages between primary kins is not allowed, but no other restrictions are there. Parallel cousin marriage, cross cousin marriage, surrogate, levirate, all these practices are there among tribals. Also, there are instances of marriage with stepmother. We already know about widow inheritance concept. So the same thing here. So the son can take the wives of the father after the death of the father. Only biological mother cannot be his wife. Apart from that, all other mothers can be his wife. So this is about the different rules governing mate selection among different social religious communities. Now, how many spouses can be there in different social religious communities? Among Hindus, traditional Hindus, polygyny was the norm. That means a man can have multiple number of wives. Polygyny. Among women, what was the rule? For women, straight life monogamy. That means a woman can have only one husband. Straight life. You are married only once. Widow remarriage was not allowed. In fact, among the upper caste, sati was also there. That means if the husband is dying, it was considered a virtue if the spouse is jumping into the funeral pyre of her husband. So this was practiced among certain upper castes. At present, serial monogamy is the norm. That means at any point of time, you are having only one spouse. Serial means later on you might have another spouse if you are going for a divorce, but at any point of time, you are having only one spouse. X and Y, they might be married together. Later on, it might happen that X and Y are divorced. So then X can marry Z, Y can marry T. At any point of time, only one spouse is there. But you can have different spouses. So serial monogamy. Among Muslims, polygyny is permitted. Man can have multiple number of wives, but at any point of time, 4 wives, not more than that. And he should not be married to sisters. He should not be married to aunt and niece together. Christians, monogamy, at present serial monogamy is there. Tribes, they permit polygyny. Multiple number of wives can be there. Now the next dimension, exchange at marriage. Among Hindus, did they exchange certain goods, commodities at the time of marriage? What is the rules governing exchange of gifts during marriage? Now, among Hindus, there is a practice of Kanyadahan. What is Kanyadahan? Kanyadahan means the girl, the Kanya, is given as a gift. So girl is given as a gift to the groom. And this Kanyadan ceremony is accompanied with Stridhan. So some gifts are also given along with the girl. Now what is the meaning of Stridhan? Now this Stridhan, these are the gifts that the female gets when she is getting married during the Kanyadan ritual. And this Stridhan is passed on to the female heir on the death of the female. So it will be passed on to her next generation, female, if she is dying. Now what is the reason for the practice of Stridhan? Why do you think Stridhan would happen there? Just think about the traditional Indian society. In traditional Indian society, women did not have any right to their parents' wealth, their parents' property. There was no such inheritance rights for females. So this Stridhan used to be a mechanism to compensate for this. When the parents are dying, when the father is dying, his property is inherited by his sons. The girls do not have any share in that. Traditional Hindu society. So to compensate for that, possibly this practice was there. So at the time of marriage, woman is given some part of the parents' property. And this is again transmitted across generation. Female heir is given that. So it was a compensation for no inheritance in Hindu society. But over a period of time, this has got transformed, this has got converted into the practice of dowry. And this thing became more predominant over a period of time. This is becoming more predominant among certain sections. If there is hypergamous marriage, amount of dowry, amount of Stridhan becomes large. Hypergamous marriage means the male is from a higher caste. The female is from the lower caste. Now what is happening? The female is getting married to someone from the higher caste. So her position in the caste hierarchy will improve. And there's a price associated with this. The price is dowry. So if hypergamous bonds are there, the demand for dowry also increases. Example, if a female is getting married to someone from Kulin Brahmin caste, the dowry will be high. And generally when it was happening, whenever the girl is from the rich family, she can marry someone from the higher caste. So Kanya Dhan and Sridhan, this is the concept. Sridhan was there because it fulfilled certain purpose at that point of time, compensation for lack of inheritance. But now it has got transformed and it has taken the shape of dowry. And with hypergamous bonds, dowry has increased. Another concept among certain castes within Hindu society, the concept of Kanya Shulka. Not predominant everywhere, but predominant among some sections. Havik Brahmins in Karnataka had it. Now this was a gift which was given to the bride, and it was out of gratitude. It can be translated as bride price, but again, we are losing out the meaning in the translation. It was more out of gratitude, how much you can pay. So here from the groom side, payment is made to the bride. Exchange of gift is made from the groom side to the bride side. Kanya Shulka among some communities. Dowry, what is the present scenario? Now also dowry is prevalent, now also dowry is exchanged. And this is something which is prevalent across India. Everywhere it is there. It was initiated among Hindu society, but now among other religions also there is prevalence of dowry. And the problem here is, because of dowry, other kind of issues also have started emerging. Not started emerging, they have started emerging since a long time and they also continue. For example, there are dowry demands. If dowry demands are not met, then it can lead to different kind of violence against the bride. There are instances of dowry deaths in India. Kitchen burning accidents. Kitchen accidents. Brides are burnt, they're killed if dowry demands are not met. We have passed different laws. Anti-Dowry Act was passed in 1961, but despite that it continues. Continues everywhere, continues in urban areas, rural areas, everywhere it is there. And now, dowry is more linked with occupation and family status. If the occupation of the groom is this, the amount of dowry will be this. Better the occupation, higher will be the dowry. Better the occupation means how it is considered in the society. If the status of the family is better, more amount of dowry will be there. So previously, hypergamous bonds used to invite more amount of dowry. Caste dimension was there. Now class dimension has also come up. Occupational status as well as familial status. Among Muslims, is there any concept of dowry? Among Muslims, there is no such prescription of Sridhan or dowry. There is a concept of mahar. This is the promise made by the groom to the bride. But it need not be paid immediately, can be paid later. But it has to be paid before divorce. If there is divorce from the side of the husband has to pay this amount, mahar. If the divorce has been initiated from the side of the female, then she might have to forego mahar. But in practice, dowry is prevalent among Indian Muslims as well. In theory, there is no concept of dowry Sridhan, but in practice, because of the influence of the larger society, among Muslims there is prevalence of dowry. What about Christians? See, Christians have also been impacted by the Hindu society, the larger society. Here also there is prevalence of dowry. Now what about tribes? Is there any exchange at marriage for tribes? Now among tribes there is no such thing as dowry Sridhan, but among some tribes there is this concept of bride price. That means the groom has to pay some amount of money or some token of gratitude. It is basically a token of gratitude. This bride price is a very inaccurate translation. We are losing out the meaning in the translation. It is more as a token of gratitude rather than selling a bride. Selling or purchasing of bride. So token of gratitude, the groom has to impress the in-laws, especially the father-in-law, that he is the right fit for her daughter. So groom provides some token gift to the bride's father specifically. So these are the different rules and norms governing exchange at the time of marriage. What about the norms concerning widow remarriage across different social religious communities? Among Hindus, what is the practice? As I told you a few moments back, among Hindus, specifically among the upper caste, widow remarriage is prohibited. In fact, among certain communities within Hindus in India, for example, Kulin Brahmins in Bengal, Rajputs in Rajasthan, sati used to be practiced. Now what is sati? The widow is expected to jump into the funeral pyre of her husband, and that way she will die in the process. Self-immolation. And it was considered to be an act of virtue. It was considered aspirational, looked up to. But these kind of provisions are not prevalent among the middle or the lower castes. There was no such stigma associated with widowhood. In fact, among the middle caste in northern India, junior levirate was practiced. Junior levirate means if the husband dies, the wife can marry the younger brother of the husband. Among lower castes, widow remarriage was quite common. But one thing has to be noted: if widow remarriage takes place, then the wife is not allowed inheritance from her deceased husband's property. Apart from these norms, there are also some exceptions. For example, among Dhanuk and Chamar tribes in Bihar, widows were preferred when it comes to marriages. They preferred to marry widows. In the northern part of UP, at present Uttarakhand, the foothills of Himalayas, among certain communities, widows were given a very good status. They were held with high reputation. So widows acquired higher stature. In fact, if the number of husbands was more, they were given even more respect. So you can see a lot of variations here. Among upper caste, sati is considered a virtue. Among middle caste, junior levirate is practiced. Among the lower caste, widow remarriage is common. Among certain communities, widows are preferred when it comes to marriages. Some communities, more the number of husbands, more is the respect. So there are a lot of variations when it comes to widow remarriage. What about Muslims? In Muslims also there was not much taboo when it comes to widow remarriage. Young widows could easily find a partner. They can easily marry. There are also examples of junior levirate among Moklas of Malabar. So among Moklas of Malabar, if the husband is dying, the wife can marry the younger brother of the husband. Among tribals, no such restriction. We already saw that there is a practice of inheritance of wives. But one thing has to be noted, that if the widow is getting married to someone else, then she has to return that bride price that she got in her previous marriage. So return of bride price is also practiced among some communities. So these are the different norms governing widow remarriage in case of India. And with this, we also come to the end of this session. So we discussed how the nature of the marital bond is different across different religious communities. In some communities it is considered sacrament, some communities it is considered to be a contract. So if it is considered sacrament, the rules will be different. Dissolution of marriage will not be there. When it comes to contractual relationships, contractual marital relationships, divorces are more permitted. Divorces are permitted, they might not be considered favorable. Then we saw what are some of the norms governing premarital conduct. sexual relations are allowed or not, what kind of notion is there towards this. Among tribals, generally sexual relations are promoted. Among Hindus, among Muslims, this is not promoted. Then we saw what are some of the norms governing selection of a mate. Among Hindus, caste endogamy, village exogamy, and in North India, multiple rules are there. Extensive rules for kinship is there. In South India, these norms are less. Among Muslims, caste-based norms are also there, even though Islam is considered to be an egalitarian religion. Same thing with Christianity as well. But among Christianity, intercaste marriages are happening. There are also instances of marriages between Syrian Christians and Latin Christians. Then we saw age at marriage. How age at marriage varies across different communities. What are the different rules and norms governing that? We also saw what is exchanged during the time of marriage. How Stridhan used to be. What was the reason for having Stridhan at some point of time? How it is getting converted to dowry later on, and how in other religions also there is some sort of impact of dowry. Apart from that, we also saw rules and norms governing widow remarriage. Among Hindus, what is the norm? Among Muslims, there is no such taboo. Among tribals, there is no such restriction. So these are different norms, rules, regulations governing marriage in case of India. So this is it when it comes to the institution of marriage. Already we have seen the institution of family in details. So these two things are mentioned together in our syllabus, but we have, since the topic is quite large, we have divided it into two parts and we have taken it into two sessions. So when you are studying it, link them together and study it. That's it from my side when it comes to the institution of marriage in case of India. Thank you.